You're listening to Crushing Club Marketing. Today we're taking flight with Jack Knutson of Flight Creative Media. Jack is the CEO and co-founder of Flight Creative Media, a full-service video production company in the Twin Cities with a specialty in drone videography. Jack's been flying drones for the past 5 years and became one of the first commercially licensed remote pilots in September of 2016. His crew at Flight Creative does terrific work, and he's going to share his drone wisdom with us starting now. Thanks for listening. If you've been thinking you need to add some aerial video to your website and have been kicking around hiring someone or even getting your own drone to get aerial video of your club, then you're going to want to buckle in for this talk. It used to be that if you wanted to capture aerial footage of your club, it was a really big deal. You needed a chopper, or you needed access to a chopper. A chopper that has a special camera that has a stabilizer on it, so it wouldn't, be shaky video. Yeah, of course, you had to have a pilot to fly the thing. And you had to have a pile of dough because it used to be really, really expensive to put that bird up in the air just so you can get those aerials. And I'll tell you, man, if things change, today drones have changed so many aspects in our world, from military to even just getting, video like what we're talking about today. But today we're just going to focus on how they've impacted our ability to shoot great aerials of anything from, our house to our clubs. So an interesting conversation today, and we've got a great guy to talk to in Jack Knutson. Jack's company, Flight Creative Media, does some really nice work, and in some ways they compete with our folks at Storyteller Media and Communications. But at the same time, we've actually hired Flight Creative to shoot some of our drone footage, and they are as locked down as they come as a group, and which is really something you want when you're hiring a production company. Flight Creative does a terrific job. They do excellent work. So we have been really fortunate to work with them, and we are very fortunate to have Jack Knutson with us today in studio.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. As a video guy and someone who appreciates it, and the work you guys do is terrific. So
thank you.
Let's start with this. Let's start with the name, Flight Creative Media. As a video company that does drone video, you'd think that you were drone shooters first and then came up with the name, but that's not how it happened.
No, for us, yeah, surprisingly, you think we kind of had it all master planned out, but no, it just kind of worked out that way with being Flight Creative Media and being from Red Wing originally with the Red Wings. We started off doing traditional ground video production, but probably at the end of 2011, 2012, we realized the future potential to integrate some of the aerial imaging into our regular ground stuff. And bottom line, it was a cool way for us guys to really take a hobby into something that's made a meaningful impact into our regular business.
But where you got Flight, share with the listeners how you came up with Flight Creative.
Sure. Well, there's a couple of us who are family members in the business. Both my brothers are in it, and our dad was in the Air Force growing up. We traveled around the country a little bit, and the sound of Air Force jets screaming overhead has always been something that's been inspiring, not only to us brothers, but everybody in the company. I know all the guys have had an avid interest in Star Wars and just aviation, I guess, in general. The idea of upward and onward, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's so cool. And the fact that, as we were talking before, the fact that the history of drone pilots is really in actual licensed pilots who are licensed to fly these type of aircraft. That's
right. Well, it's definitely been a work in progress, I guess you could say, from a regulation framework in terms of what the FAA has allowed, someone like me who didn't have a background in general aviation to be integrated into the national airspace. You're right, though. It really stemmed from a foundation of, safety first in flying and keeping the airspace free for general aviation traffic to move around freely without being interfered with by drones, which, as you know, is a potential risk, and you hear media stories that happens every so often. But kind of starting with that general aviation knowledge framework, I think, was a good way to have people who, needed to learn about those safety aspects or just general airport operations and where to keep safe distances from. I think it was a good place to start. It definitely had its snags, and it kind of took a long time for the FAA to get to where we are today. But even just this month with, the rolling out of the LANC approval system for airspace authorization requests, a year ago we had to wait for a period of time to get approval to fly in certain airspace. But today, integrated through some very popular apps that drone pilots use, you can submit a request and within seconds have an answer from the towers at these airports telling you whether or not you can fly right now. So that's a huge step forward, and it really all did stem from the general aviation background.
That's really cool. Yeah, we'll get into that because that's something that a lot of times I think that amateur pilots, for sure, they ignore and they don't even think about.
Sure.
So let's dive into the some of the meat of today's talk around drone footage for clubs, and whether it's a golf club, whether I've seen some terrific video for yacht clubs as well. I mean, some of the imagery over water is spectacular, but just getting right to it, for a general manager, for a marketing director, someone who is interested in using drone footage and wants to hire a drone crew, what do you do and what should they be looking for? I mean, the first thing I do is I go and I Google something, but let's say they do that, then what should they be looking for?
Right. No, that's a great question, because I think there's a lot of opportunities and options in today's world to, do a quick Google search, and maybe even if you have a drone, go out and put it up and achieve essentially a similar result to a high-end aerial production. One thing I would highly encourage is to ensure that whoever you're hiring to do the aerial work is certified and knowledgeable about what the rules are and where you can and cannot fly and at what times you can and cannot fly. Beyond that, just having a general sense of safety and respect for people's privacy, I think, is a good trait to be considering. But really, with a focus on safety, there's a number of different platforms and aircraft options that, depending on the scope of what you're trying to accomplish, you can have a small $800 unit that will do some very quality work. But you can also have something that's a little beefier, give you a real cinematic, depth of field, shallow focus, look to a type of shot that you're trying to execute. It's really just what you're looking for.
Yeah. So the gear, we'll talk about the gear as well today, but along the lines of certified and licensing, will a certified drone pilot and crew, should they have that ready? I mean, is that something that, if they're fumbling around is that maybe an indicator that they may not be?
From my experience, I always have that stuff ready, to go at a drop of a hat. I have my license. I have any documentation that I need. I make sure I have an email handy of, building or location permissions. I think that's one thing. Being certified and being ready to go in that standpoint is one thing, but I think getting permissions from the right people at the right times is another step that sometimes there can be some confusion if, the marketing director is booking somebody to come do some aerial work, and then they get there, but the building owner or someone on the grounds crew wasn't aware. It just, if you're nice and willing to show that, yep, you're there legitimately and you have the proper licensing and documentation to be doing that, I think just being friendly is also another. Can't overstate that too.
Yeah. So one of the things that, especially people who aren't used to or have never produced drone footage, they may not realize that a lot of times it's a two-person crew. And I know that's how you guys like to operate. Can you just walk through why a two-person crew? What are the advantages? What if someone, what if a marketing director is going, yeah, he's a drone guy and he says he can shoot it. So, what are the things people should consider in that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so we fly the DJI Inspire 2 with our two-man operations team, and basically allows me to fly with one remote controller, the aircraft, totally separate from the camera gimbal. And Nate, who's our chief cinematographer, will use a similar remote control, but it operates the camera gimbals, like I mentioned, separately, so you can really execute, smooth, seamless shots while your aircraft is moving maybe in a direction that's totally separate from where the camera is focusing on. And that has an advantage, like I mentioned, for the cinematic quality of the types of shots you're able to execute. But that's not to say you can't achieve similar things with smaller, cheaper units. It really comes down to your preference for what type of image quality you're looking for and ease of use. It is, from a pilot standpoint, it's nice having somebody worried about capturing the shot, and that allows me to worry about being safe and not hitting anything if we're in a tight area. But there's sometimes, and especially with more and more indoor shoots that are popping up, and as the sensing technology becomes better on these smaller units, to have one guy do everything, just from a smaller unit. Being a smaller sized aircraft, it's a little bit easier to control. It can't go as far, can't go as fast, that type of thing, can't handle quite as much wind. So there are some limiting factors there, but really it just comes down to what you're more comfortable with and what you're trying to accomplish.
Sure. So I'm listening to you and I'm thinking of so it's kind of like driving versus driving and texting. It's like you can do them both, but you probably shouldn't.
That's
no,
right.
but so if you want to get some really specific shots, or you want to move the drone or fly the drone in a certain way with a very specific shot, it's probably helpful to have a two-person crew, but you don't absolutely have to have it, is what I hear you saying.
Totally. Yep. It can make it easier, but it's not essential, but definitely helps. It helps.
It's so interesting because it's like an amateur videographer, right? It's like, hey, we got a shot of this, and let's just say we got a shot of this person singing her song on the stage. My kid. You did. It's not a very good shot, but you got it. And if that's all you care about, that you captured that moment in some way, then hey, nice work. But if you wanted it to look a little bit different, if you wanted a different point of view, if you wanted it to have different texture, whatever that is. There are other ways you could do that, and it's really, for people that I'm just,
Absolutely.
thinking about this, like as a drone shooter, it's like, yeah, you can get that, but you might have been able to do it better or differently.
Exactly. You're spot on with it. And I think, kind of thinking of today's world where everybody has a high quality camera in their pocket. Everyone can be a filmmaker or a photographer these days. But like you said, it really is kind of the content of what you're hoping to capture in the way you're hoping to capture it versus just having the ability to do so. You can be a little more creative. The unit we fly the X5S camera on the Inspire 2, which allows us to swap out different focal length lenses. So, we can really manage and mitigate a type of shot that we're hoping to achieve in that way versus having like the smaller Mavic Air or Mavic Pro. You're not quite as able to achieve that level of cinematic shot composure.
Okay, let's dumb this down a little bit. You got some good buzzwords in there. So the lenses, so there's some. Would you say the focal length?
The focal length.
The focal length. There we go. So some of the drone cameras you can swap out lenses, and those I'm assuming are a higher end product than some of the lowers. So let's while we're talking, let's talk about what should club managers, people who are considering this service, what should they know about the gear? So often, people show up and say, "Well, this is the gear we use," but is it helpful for them to be knowledgeable?
I think some of that work we'd like to take on our end, being that we have a fleet of 3 that we operate right now, and like I mentioned, for the different purposes, different types of shoots that we're on. If some clients do have a real specific, they're a video shooter, they know what type of file they're looking for, they know what even kind of shot composition that they're hoping to achieve. They're more director of photography, coming at it with that sort of standpoint. So you have those types of people, and that's great. We love working with them too. It's fun having folks who know exactly what they're hoping to achieve. Then we can go do our best to go get that. But then there's also people who really have no idea where to even start, and we take a listen to what they're hoping to accomplish also. And if we can get the same thing done and maybe the budget's a little bit less for a one-man smaller unit, we'll go with that. But honestly, these days, and I don't want to have said this, a year ago, or especially, any longer than that, but today the gear and the camera, the image that comes out of any of these products is very comparable and very similar. So for a $800 investment versus $1,200 versus, even up to $2,000, you're really going to get a very similar, non-distinguishable image out of that. Now, what you can do with that image in post and what you can do with that image in camera to create shots. That's really the advantage of having some of the higher end stuff. But just from a high level basic standpoint, if you're looking to get into something, today, anything $700 all the way up is going to give you something that you can be proud of to put on your website.
So with that, that's really helpful to know, because I think sometimes you get, geez, what am I going to get for $1,200 versus $800? But understanding that a lot of clubs are shooting exteriors, whether it's a golf course or whether it's a yacht in one of the Great Lakes or in the ocean. Are there some cameras that are built more for that than others? And which ones? What would you recommend if you were going to do some of those exteriors?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a good point too. I think for anything high end and with, wind factors at anything, 25 mile an hour gusts is usually the threshold that the GPS will keep the big Inspire 2 locked in location. And it's quite a size difference between that and something like the Mavic Pro or Mavic Air, which tends to get tossed around a little bit easier in gusty winds. So if it really comes down to the day that you have set for production that you're looking to shoot, if your weather conditions are looking to be a little, turning unfavorable, the Inspire 2 is going to be able to handle that. 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to be fine getting away with achieving it. The other ones you might have to wait a while, break down and reset until the weather conditions improve. But the cameras with the X5S on the Inspire 2, different focal lengths, allow you to, if it's kind of really gusty around this corner of the building 50 yards away from you, you can achieve that same shot from where you're sitting rather than have to go up close like you might with some of the smaller stuff where you're capturing what you're viewing. Instead, with the Inspire 2, you might be able to swap a different lens on there and get super tight from a bit further away. And just being a bigger aircraft, again, able to withstand a bit more. The battery flight times are all pretty comparable, I would say, between those.
And what could people expect for that?
So the Inspire 2 with the X5S camera, which is a little bit heavier, you could still probably get close to 20 minutes of flight time, which if you think about 20 minutes of continuing filming for video footage, that's quite a bit of content you're able to capture in just one flight of batteries. And we have 3 sets that we'll cycle through, so we're pretty close to being able to continually operate with the charging setup that we have. The little ones, you get a little bit longer flight time, closer to 30 minutes. But again, that's really it tends to be more than enough for what you're hoping to capture. Now on something like a golf course, if your goal is to specifically capture something similar to like what you see on a national TV broadcast, every hole, that might be something where you have to do a few times and reset and land, recharge, that kind of thing. But if you're just generally capturing coverage of a location or a space, yeah, it's impressive what you're able to get out of one set of batteries. Yeah,
it's interesting. I think a lot of times people don't realize that when you're shooting, like you said, you're stopping, you're starting, you're stopping, and that's really cool. The perspective that you get in using drone footage is so cool in that, and especially if you're shooting golf courses where you can see the course in a totally different way. What are the things that you've seen that you really like in drone photography, especially in golf? And what are some of the things that maybe are like, you could do without?
Sure. That's a really good question. I think for me and for us, we were at the age when we grew up playing Mario Golf on N64, and you'd see that.
Awesome.
You'd get the whole preview flying. I like to say the low and slow approach of like the whole hole, showing bunkers and hazards. And then when you get to the green area, a slow rise followed by like a tilt down, and then you hear the pin shot. And so to me, that was always like, oh, that's a perfect framework. And as it's become integrated in the national broadcasts, I know with the Players Championship coming up this week, I've already seen some coverage that's showcasing some really cool, real slow sliding type maneuvers, through trees. But really, for me, if you're an avid, golf enthusiast, if you're able to get a sense of what the hole looks and feels like, aside from seeing the sign placard, if you really want to see where that lie is going to maybe end up, being able to fly it, like I said, low and slow, and then reveal the end hole right at the end with a nice tilt down. I think that's always nice.
That's great. So marketing directors, I can just hear him. So wait a second. So for me to get my tips on how to use this drone guy, I'm going to go play Super Mario Golf.
It's pin shot.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is so cool. All right, let's get into some of the details that people may not think of. And I hear this all the time talking to people at clubs, and they say, well, our head golf professional just got a drone. Or there's a director of marketing at a Minnesota resort that he was telling me he was on his second drone because he crashed his first one. But there's more for people to know than just going out and buying a drone and going flying it over their golf course or over their clubhouse or whatever that is, or their buildings. FAA restrictions. What do people need to know that they may not know about that?
The distinction between operating for hobbyist use versus what falls under, it's called Part 107, FAA airspace licensing program. So being a hobbyist, there's a little bit different rules around what you can and can't do. Same thing with the commercial side of things. So really, if you're looking to use any of the content or data gathered in the air for your business or what's considered commercial use, the testing protocol for Part 107 requires a ground test similar to going to the DMV if you're renewing your motorcycle license or car driver's license type thing, which I think is a real positive step that the FAA took, because it really it forced the people who are going to be doing this seriously to really take it seriously, and it still allows people who aren't so serious about selling their content. It still gives them the ability to fly safely, but it does separate the two, and it does really allow those Part 107 holders who have undertaken the knowledge test and learned the information about safety and airport procedures, airspace issues. It really empowered them to be able to utilize their aircraft in a different way. And that wasn't the case for years leading up to this. I think September of 2016 is when this finally all rolled together into a licensing program that people were able to go pursue without needing to have their general pilot's license, which up until 2016, that was the requirement. So it's come a long way. It still provides people to enjoy the drones, but there's definitely different rules around staying away from airports. You got to keep a further distance if you're a hobbyist. You need to be flying in different conditions that you can't get the same the waivers to these rules that you can apply for under Part 107. So it has been an interesting evolution in the process.
So what's interesting, what I found to be interesting in talking about this in advance is the fact that some people might look at these FAA regulations and say, "Oh my gosh, they're making it so hard for people to fly drones and maybe production people to make money doing it." But the point is that these rules existed before people started putting drones up all over the place, right? I mean, these have been rules and now the FAA, it seems like, is trying to say, geez, how do we adapt a little bit and make, because the world has changed.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's the AMA Academy of Model Aircraft, I believe it is, they've been around for decades, and they've been supporting hobbyist model hobby flyers of helicopters, fixed wing, prop plane type things for a number of years. And you're right, it was kind of a challenge for the FAA and for aircraft operators to come together and understand the reasons for the licensing and regulations that have now come from these ongoing debates and discussions. But I think from a general safety standpoint, as much of a pain in the process it may have been to wait for the FAA to deliver a system that we could all latch onto, I think it's a good thing, because the U.S. airspace, that, as you know, is one of the most congested and busy in all the world. So to keep people who are actually flying in the air safe first, I think it was a good move by the FAA at this point now.
Yeah, so there's a lot of value in having a drone crew that is licensed, that's experienced, that has the right tools for the right conditions, asks the right questions of the club. Generally, if you're able to share, how do companies typically charge for their services? What should people expect?
Sure. For us, it's we looked at our traditional ground video production, and I think a lot of guys are implementing their aerial services in the same way, at least for image capturing. I know, when we say drones, there's a lot of context as to what that could mean in terms of data collection. But in terms of aerial imaging, we really break it down by half day, full day, just like we do for ground production. And if there really is a simple one-off, somebody's just looking for one piece of a larger project or one shot, we'll break it down by an hourly rate if that's the case. But generally, to get enough coverage, you'd want at least a half day time frame. So up 4 or 5 hours of flying should get you more than what you need.
Yeah, and that's good. I mean, because as if you've produced a video before, that you shoot way more footage for the piece than you ever use.
Right.
And that's one of the things that can sometimes be hard to swallow for people. They'll go, geez, you spent all day shooting, but you only use 30 seconds
Exactly.
or whatever. But very similar with drone footage then in that way as well.
Yep.
Let's just talk a little bit about post-production, because you see, it's so easy to fall in love with the images. And how do you balance when you guys go into post-production? What are the things you think about as far as the balance between aerial footage and drone footage, and does the what you're shooting dictate that, or how much do you put of each in your pieces?
Sure, that's a really good point, because I think as cool as it is to see these aerial perspectives, they can be oversaturated in our content that we're creating. And the general messaging of the overall story, I think, of the video piece that we're making has really got to be front and center, so it doesn't become about cool drone shots. It really is, if it were a golf course making a promotional video, how is it still maintaining your identity and sense of what the story you're trying to tell, without it just turning into beautiful images to kind of just sit back and enjoy,
like eye candy, right? I mean,
right,
yeah,
exactly, yeah. And that has a place too. But I think with so many people able to get in the air nowadays and film something, it really comes down to selecting and choosing the types of, you have your establishing shots from the air, you have your approach shots, you have similar types of conceptual ideas you would on the ground in terms of framing and storytelling. That moving to the air, I think, has to be handled in a similar way if you want your message to still maintain a cohesive feel and not turn into just beauty shots with music to it. I mean, that has a place too, but I think there's a bigger story you can tell if you use those epic drone shots and you intersperse them in a way that you come back to it every so often. You're not just sitting on a reel of aerial stuff for the whole video.
Yeah, it's kind of like I remember when I was younger and someone. It was like in a film class or something. They said, count the number of edits in this one part of the movie. And there's so many more edits that are made than what people realize, just because visually it needs to stay interesting.
Totally.
And, like what you're saying, if you've ever sat there and watched drone shot after drone shot, after a while you're like, this is kind of boring. Like, I want to see something else. And it probably, to your point, doesn't capture the brand or the message or the perspective that club wants to portray about who they are. Right. Maybe their clubhouse isn't best shot from the air, and there's a better, unique perspective.
Exactly. Yeah. Good point there. And I mean, even if you are in the air, how are you framing that, and what are you really focusing on? If you're just hovering over the whole grounds, kind of just doing a slow pan, that might be a nice establishing look at it. But if that's all it is, really, what are you showing? So I think you're right to think, how are you using it in the overall edit in ways that are enhancing the already interesting message that you're trying to get across? How is it used to enhance it rather than overtake it?
So let's get into some. Let's put you in the teacher chair here. So someone's listening to this podcast right now, and they're going, "Yeah, that's good, but I know I can shoot my own stuff. Like I'm going to go buy a drone. I've done my research. I've Googled everything I need to know. Now I'm going to go ahead and buy. First of all, from a purchasing perspective, what is it people should know when they're looking for gear? And let's start with that and then get into maybe some of the basic piloting things that people should know.
Sure, yeah. At least when we started, we started on something really small and something we knew we would be able to, bust
Crash
out.
and burn.
Crash and burn, exactly. Thank you. Really a toy, something that's less than half a pound, something that's really light and we're able to fly anywhere inside and smash if we needed to. But just to get the flying skills down, the orientation, feeling how certain wind gusts affect your flight, getting used to that on a foundational level, I think, is the first step. If you really do have an interest and you're willing, already Googling information and kind of willing to educate yourself, doing a little bit of practice on that front end with something that you can break if you need to was huge for me in gaining kind of confidence in the hand-eye coordination, and also it's probably just not a wise investment to go big right away, get it up in the air, and it's, you get 50 yards out away from you, your depth perception and perspective of what you're actually doing to impact the movement of the craft, it changes as you get further out, and you start to notice how wind at certain altitudes can change on a dime directionally. So just getting comfortable with those foundational things, piloting the craft, I think will help inform, moving into a purchase of something like a Mavic Air first, or do you go with a Phantom 4 first, or do you go all the way up to, the Inspire level? It's really, once you know how good you are and comfortable you are flying, after some practice, I think that's when you can make that call.
So is it kind of like, I equate it to driving a stick shift or maybe riding a motorcycle, where it's like there's something in your brain that clicks about the clutch and everything else that, regardless of what you're driving, that idea, that timing just makes sense on all of them. Is it similar with piloting a drone, where it's like, if you can get the basics on a really, on a cheap little drone, you should be able to pilot something bigger?
Absolutely. That's I couldn't echo that more, to be true, at least in my experience. Very similar to, riding a motorcycle, learning how to operate the clutch. And once you just practice and get that muscle memory down, it becomes a habit, almost like, I guess, playing a stringed instrument too. You'd struggle through figuring out how to play the banjo, as I did.
Yeah,
and then at
nice.
some point it just clicked and you're like, whoa, this is sweet. I'd say it's a similar skill set in flying the drone or riding a bike.
Yeah. So, all right. So this is getting a little bit inside or into the weeds, but do they all come with like spare props? So if you crash them, there's, or
yeah, that's a good question. No, they do. The ones that we've bought, they've all been products from DJI, which is a Chinese manufacturer. They're kind of the world leader at this point of drone platforms and aircraft. Yeah, they do all come with spare props. Luckily,
I remember when my son got his and he opened it up and I saw the spare props. And I thought, thank God. Yeah. I mean, we got a backup just in case.
Yep.
So as it relates to the hobbyist, amateur drone pilot, what are some real I guess basic tips that you would have, especially if they're a solo operator and they want to get some great shots of their club? Are there any basic recommendations, tips you would give to that person?
Sure. I would definitely say, as you're starting with whatever aircraft you go with the one-man option, I would say start slow. When you get out in an open area, or if you're out on a tee box, I guess, in the golf world, really just get a feel for what the wind's doing and what what you're able to see, I guess, as you get up to altitude. And generally there's a 400-foot ceiling on how high you're able to fly. That can be, you can get waivers on that and whatnot, but generally we'll say 400-foot limit. So get it up to 400 feet and see what that looks like from up there. See how your perspective changes of the tiny speck in the air versus, when you're right in front of your face. It's a lot easier to see what your thumb stick inputs are affecting. But when it gets further away, that's much more challenging. So really know where you are in relation to your drone and know what heading the drone has, because the apps these days make it really easy, to be honest. If you get comfortable flying physically with something small inside, and you get outside then with whatever video drone you're ready to go get some cool shots with, if you have that practice, I think as long as you're being safe and you do some quick little tests, low and slow, you're really good to go after you feel comfortable doing that. It's just a matter of not biting off more than you can chew, and really maintaining, and this is still a requirement, the visual line of sight. You do have to keep an eye on the aircraft at all times, so it can't ever escape your field of view. You can't go behind hills or trees or buildings and lose sight of it, even though you're able to maybe still see the feed on your FPV monitor that you have. You still always want to have one eye on the sky and one eye on what you're shooting.
Yeah. So I'm hearing understanding where you are in relation to the drone, low and slow. Mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah, that's a good idea. And then taking it up to the ceiling to see how what 400 feet looks like.
Yep, exactly. And then know what your emergency protocol will be.
What do you mean by that?
I've had situations where a battery just, kind of conked out mid-flight, and when that happens, it it can be a little scary in the moment to realize, you know what you should
She's
do.
going down.
She's going down. Yeah. Somebody go catch that.
Yeah.
With the one that we built to start with a long time ago, that actually did happen. We learned a lesson about making sure you land with enough reserves and all that kind of stuff. But now with the app integration, you can set parameters to have, a warning that comes on when the battery threshold is, say 20%, it'll beep, low battery, time to consider maybe bringing it back. Because if you have the wind at your back and you launch your drone up and you get, as far as you can see, but you have half battery now to come back against the wind, you're not going to have that same ability to get back as you did to go as far out as you did. So just stuff like that, you got to start thinking about with these machines, which they're not toys. As much fun as they are aircraft considered by the FAA, and they are potentially dangerous to many different types of objects. So just ensuring that you have emergency procedure in place if it did suddenly lose signal. What do you do? Do you wait for it to return to home, or are you going to walk up to it and be ready to catch it if that were the case? I've seen all kinds of crazy things happen with people online. We've been fortunate not to have too many incidences on our end, but each time there's a close enough call, it's a big learning opportunity.
Yeah. So whatever that protocol is, just make sure you know what the rules are.
Yep.
And we do joke around about it, but especially some of the bigger drones they're heavy. You something to them, and if you hit someone, run into a car, hit a member, you got a lot of problems.
Exactly. Yeah, and even the noise from them too. I guess I should mention, just as you're out flying, just be cognizant of the people you're flying over or around, because for the most part, in my experience, people are genuinely interested and they think it's really cool technology to come check on, ask a bunch of questions about. But if you're approaching somebody who's not aware of what you're doing and you run up on and scare them, that's bad for the industry and bad for those people who are maybe now see drones as a menacing thing instead of something that can be useful and helpful.
Yeah, maybe bad for member relations too, right? Because people don't like to be video, and a lot of people don't like to be caught on video if they're not aware of it too. So
absolutely,
that's really important. Yeah.
Make sure you have the right permissions you need.
Yeah, Jack. Last question: where do you think this is all going? We talked a little bit about how artificial intelligence might impact all this, and where do you see the future of drone photography, videography?
Yeah, absolutely. Even there's technology on there now with the latest app updates, all kinds of active track modes that you can basically press inputs in your app, and the autonomous program will run the flight based on what you draw with your finger. Or if you center your focal point on your face, the drone will then fly different routes that you are able to program around your face now as you're moving. So there's these active tracking technologies that are already on these aircraft that, it's still absolutely, I would say, fundamentally important to understand physically how to fly these things. But, what's coming next, I think, is going to be much more, how are we programming these things? How are we inputting information so that they can make smarter decisions even than we could? Because at the end of the day, we're not the ones on the platform seeing what they're seeing, and they are, and they now have spatial awareness with maybe a swarm of drones that, you look at the egg industry with farming technology, the data acquisition for search and rescue. It's really, really incredible. For us, I think one of the most exciting recent things we've tried doing is throwing a 360 camera up on the Inspire 2 and see what that looks like. Flying with a 360 perspective. Now someone can put on a set of VR goggles and, just in thinking of future possibilities, what does that virtual golf experience look like? MSP Airport, for example, has a new PGA golf simulator. Yeah. I've always wanted to stop up in there. Maybe I'll have to. But if you had, that type of environment now in the 3D version, I think it's endless where this could go.
That is really interesting. So you can sit there and look around you and see what's there.
Yeah.
Well, you got to figure if they can, if self-driving cars are possible, self-flying drones are certainly possible as well.
Yeah, they're already here.
Yeah. Jack, thanks so much for being with us today. And if you want to learn more about flight creative media, where should people go?
You can check out our website at flightcreativemedia.com, and we're also on Facebook and Instagram, and have a blog going if anyone's interested in reading more about what we're up to on a weekly basis.
Awesome. Well, thanks for helping our listeners crush their club marketing, and best of luck to you.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate it. Good luck out there.
Okay, next week we are going to talk about storytelling for your club. All clubs have a story to tell, and yet we don't always know where to find them. We don't know how to tell them, and most importantly, find the time to actually do this part of your job. So we're going to cover these issues and more. I'm going to put on my old reporter hat for this one and fly solo. It's interesting what TV news teaches you about enterprising stories. And until then, keep crushing your club marketing.